Well, Ben, turning to you with your USAID hat on, part of the work that you did for this interagency group focused on Ghana had a set of specific recommendations for what the US can do, what's the value added of the US engagement on these issues of land reform, land security. Perhaps you could explain what you think the US has to offer in this area from a government perspective.
Okay, well, let me start by saying I think that our work in this area was a good illustration of sort of the evolving philosophy of land tenure interventions that's happened over the last few decades. Back in the 70s and 80s, donors and governments used to try to address these issues usually through these large-scale systematic land titling programs, which often didn't have the intended result. Jolene talked a little bit about that. But these were, not particularly effective, sometimes even counterproductive, certainly not cost-effective in terms of generating the kinds of outcomes that were hoped for. Why didn't these kinds of things work? Well, for one reason is that a lot of the governments of the countries where these initiatives were taking place had low capacity, right? Didn't really have the capability to enforce property rights in a lot of cases. They weren't able to maintain updated property registries, resolve disputes, things like that. And the bottom line is that if the government can't enforce the rules, right, then a land title is just a piece of paper, right? A land title is completely meaningless if there's nothing behind it. And I think that's kind of the lesson that we've learned. There's certainly other factors there, particularly that we've learned to kind of recognize the customary system and try to work within the customary system in doing these kinds of things. But to sort of summarize that evolution that's taken place, I think we still see an important role for registration and documentation of rights. We still see that as an important part of the process. But equally, if not more important, is a whole set of other processes, such as building and strengthening government institutions, right? Doing this through a process that local actors are engaged in, that local actors buy into, building awareness of property rights among the people who have them, and making sure that formal systems build on customary systems and work in concert with them. Okay, so that was sort of the perspective that I think our recommendations reflected, and also what I think some of the other donors in Ghana have been doing. And just to give a couple of examples very briefly of what other donors have been doing, MCC has piloted a process of effective and efficient land registration that's gone along with large-scale public awareness campaigns, as well as institutional strengthening, particularly at the local level. Another major donor in Ghana in the land sector is the World Bank, which has had a couple of major programs that in total have represent over $100 million in investments. And those have been for things like supporting legal reforms. They've also supported a process of codifying customary systems, so essentially trying to understand the customary rules in different places and regularize those and put those down on paper to make them clear. The World Bank has also done other kinds of institutional strengthening, capacity building, a lot of working on dispute resolutions. So when our interagency group met to talk about what we could do, we recommended not to engage in some kind of huge, monolithic titling program like we might have recommended 30 years ago, but rather we recommended to sort of build on these existing efforts by donors and to try to use our US government resources as cost effectively as possible. And two particular interventions that I'll talk about that we recommended. One was to provide support for an institution in Ghana called Customary Land Secretariats. And these are community-level organizations that essentially help traditional authorities with the day-to-day tasks of land administration, right? With things like recording rights, with updating records and things like that. So this is essentially the land administration system within the customary system. And there's been evidence that these institutions have worked very well in some cases, but that they've been underfunded. So we recommended working with the customary land secretariats to provide them with more training, with more equipment, and to sort of modernize the way that they're recording and registering these rights that are administered by traditional authorities. A second recommendation we had that I'll highlight was to support a participatory and inclusive process of demarcating boundaries between communities. And this is a big issue in Ghana because often it's not clear which traditional authority has jurisdiction over which area, and the boundaries are not clearly defined. And so this can lead to conflicts between communities, particularly as they're growing and particularly as people are expanding the areas where they settle. And this is sort of a growing problem in Ghana. And we particularly highlighted this one because as population pressures increase, right, this is something that's going to get worse and worse. And so we think that stepping in now and sort of establishing clear records and clear demarcation of which communities where and which traditional authority has jurisdiction where would be an important contribution and something that could save a lot of potential trouble down the road.
Thanks very much. And Bryn, over to you. One of the sort of overarching themes of this series of events we're